Greetings from Metal Wani, Jeff. How are you doing?
Very good. Yeah, just coming back from a nice day here, a nice hot day in downtown Ottawa, and I moved out of the city, so it's a bit of a drive to get back out where I live now.
Oh, there you go.
So it's a nice drive, though. Nice, fast. Get to listen to some really good metal tunes on the way out.
There you go. Yeah, that's always the nice thing about long drives is plenty of time to get your metal fix.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yep. So just a few weeks left for the release of the new Annihilator album, Suicide Society. How excited are you for that release with you as the front man?
Yeah, well, yeah, you had to, actually, if you hadn't added the last part, I'd be just psyched. I'm just kidding. No, it's just, it's, you know, in one hand, it's another record. This is the 15th album, which is, I don't know what the word is. It's, you're grateful and you're honored and you're lucky and, you know, that you get to make music for a living and have done it right since a teenager, basically. So, yeah, every album I usually sit back. I'm not religious, but I will definitely sit back, usually on a plane ride over for a press trip or something after the record's done, and if I have to, well, when I have to get on a plane, go somewhere to start promotion on the album, I usually look out the window of the airplane and go, wow, thank you, whoever's taking care of this. Thanks for letting me do this for all these years. But yeah, it's definitely psyched in one sense. That we survived, or I survived to make another record. And that's the best part. That's the only real big thing that I sort of hope for. And then everything else after that's a bonus. Yeah, singing now. So that was like, this is, I say it with such enthusiasm, don't I? Basically, this is my fourth album singing with Annihilator, but I hadn't sang on our records since the 90s, I think 94 to 97. And I had not intended to, and our singer of the last 12 years, Dave Padden, who was also our live guitar player, suddenly left with, and we're still good friends. I tried to find out why he left, because I'd finished all the music and demoed the vocals like I always do, and was ready to fly him in to my city, and he just, with no notice, he just quit. And you know, you're instantly in shock when somebody that you get along with and has been a major part of your career and life for 12 years says, there's no coming back, I'm done. But he explained it as he had basically not been into it for the last 4 years or so. It wasn't an artistic thing, it wasn't me, it wasn't money. In fact, I tried to bribe him with more money. Didn't work. But it was just the traveling. It was his excuse that it was just, he couldn't deal with the traveling anymore. And I thought, well, you could have given me a lot more notice than a few days before flying in to sing on the record. But there must be something else going on there. But I know Dave well, and if he has to do it like that, there's something, you know, reasonably serious for him that he has to stop doing it. So I think it might have been medical or family or something back home. I think that's probably where it's at. So I was left to get a little shocked, panicked for a week, then looked for another singer for a few weeks, and then realized, you know what, I think I'm going to take on a challenge and have a little more excitement than I normally do and sing on the record. I'd already sang on the demo for the record, and it was all finished and ready, but instead of jumping into my studio and just doing it and saying, yeah, I'll sing, I said, you know, if I'm going to do this again, I'm going to do it seriously, because I didn't like some things about my singing in the earlier days, and I wanted to see if I could get rid of the things I didn't like and also train properly. So I took lessons for 2.5 months. And then I sat down with a piece of paper and wrote down, you know, who do I, to sort of fine-tune my attitude on the singing when I was going to go in and actually sing this. Who are my favorite singers? Well, I said in metal, it'd be Halford, Dickinson, and Dio in that order, and rock would be like, you know, David Lee Roth and Bon Scott and early Sebastian Bach and, you know, lots of great singers. But I can't sing any of that stuff because these guys are career 1 in a billion geniuses at what they're doing or what they did. And I thought, well, realistically, what do I sing in the car or in the shower when no one's around or something? And I said, well, I wrote it down. I said, well, Lane Staley, like to sing along with Alice in Chains, Ozzy, Mustaine, Hetfield. And I stopped there and said, okay, there's my style mixed with some of the old Waters vocals on the earlier albums, hopefully without the bad habits I thought I had. And there's your vocals on the new Annihilator record, which is not going to be definitely not as good as the guys I just mentioned, but it is going to definitely have that influence, and I think I got a lot of attitude on it, if whether anyone likes it or not, which so far people seem to like it. You can hear the influences, but I think I got a lot of feel on there. I was very surprised. It's the first album I've done where I got that much feel on it.
I'll tell you what, I totally dug the vocals. And it's funny that you mentioned, Ozzy, James Hetfield, and Dave Mustaine, because, like, to me, that really, those influences really jumped out to me, and it was an awesome mix of all those influences. So it definitely, like you said, it's not, trying to emulate, but I mean that all together, definitely you get your own sound going there.
Yeah, I think for me, it's even right from the beginning when I started with my first album in '89 called Alice in Hell. Right from the beginning, and even now 14 albums later, I've always kind of not hid the fact musically that I'm kind of Annihilators made up of 30, 40 metal bands and guitar players that I've loved through my teenage years and still today. And now vocally, it's essentially, I've been writing the lyrics and the melodies and the vocal stuff, most of it for the whole career. So, and I produce the vocals in the studio and engineer and all that stuff. So you always get the singers in our band over the years have sort of got the Waters sort of stamp or treatment or influence on what they were doing anyway. Like I said, I demo the stuff for the singers and say, here's what I got, and if you got something better, add it. And so there's a bit of that already, but it makes quite a difference when you change vocalists. But I mean, especially European fans and South American fans and Japanese fans that we've had, they kind of were there from the beginning and never left. They kind of get it because it's like, hey, this is, Waters was on 3 other albums, and there's a similarity there. But now all of a sudden, a few other influences in his singing are coming out, and he's kind of changed his voice in some way. So it's kind of fun. It's good, kind of cool to see the reactions. Especially, we just got back from playing Wacken and a lot of other great festivals. So it was good to get out there and just see how much work I had to do as a guitar player / singer live, and get ready for our headline tour there next month.
Nice. So you guys released video for Suicide Society and then a lyric video for Creeping Again. Now, how do you think that the fans have responded to those 2 tracks so far?
Well, I think the European fan base that we've had from the beginning reacted as they normally would. I think I found something new, that our sort of popularity, even though we haven't toured North America, our home country of Canada even, for a long, long time, because of the internet and because of slowly fans that are looking for new or different metal, they find us eventually over the years. They find the bigger names and the bigger bands, and then eventually it trickles down and they give us a listen. I think everywhere in the world where we've been doing well for 25 years, it was just a normal reaction of, okay, great. I mean, in Europe, for example, and not trying to boast or, I guess I'm proud of it, but the pre-sale orders for the new record are more than the last album sold over there. So that's the hype on it, and the interest is bigger and bigger every time we do a record in the last 4 records. But now that we're starting to get some visibility in Canada and the States, that reaction comes out, and we did a video for Suicide Society, the title track, and it was basically a song that is not like any of the other songs we've done in the past, which is, there's a lot of songs like that where they're like, what is that? And the next minute you got a thrash song, the next minute you got a love song. Do you know what I mean? You've got sort of a silly, I mean, we've got a song called Craft Dinner, which is like a silly Canadian humor influenced song about macaroni and cheese, obviously. And then you've got a song that is kind of important or lyrically, conscious of something, or like a family member died of cancer or an environmental issue. Then you got some really goofy, silly cliche lyrics. And so all of a sudden on this record, being for some reason exposed to a lot more people in North America than we normally would, I have no idea why. I think it's just, it just keeps rolling along and people start finding out more and more about you. You get I think in North America, you get the typical reaction of, wow, this stuff's awesome, or, man, this is horrible. I thought this band Annihilator was supposed to be a thrash band, but that's typical, because if you're not there doing the touring, if you're not there with a record deal or tour agencies booking you or getting press or doing it, which is another question answer, you set yourself up for that, and most people that don't know us don't realize we're not a thrash band. We're actually a heavy metal band / thrash metal band. And in heavy metal comes ballads, blues, a bit of jazz, hard rock, and in thrash comes, of course, the angry, aggressive stuff that a lot of people are used to hearing. Like a typical, I'll say American, it could be Canadian, Lamb of God fan may not even understand what the hell we're doing because they're not going to hear that aggression or anger in every song. In fact, it doesn't show up that much. But I could talk for hours and you could fall asleep, or you can ask me another question.
Okay, yeah. So with the opening line, the title track goes, "Welcome."
I didn't even answer. I don't think I even really answered your question, but yeah, sort of.
Yeah, you did. You really did.
Sort of.
The response of the fans and everything like that, and I think you answered that question very well.
Okay, good, and more.
Some people dig it, some people don't, but you guys are getting more of a spike in interest, which is definitely a plus.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but the beginning of the title track, it opens with the lyrics, "Welcome to the dark side of the human race."
Yeah,
this gives me kind of like a clear idea that the album's trying to kind of reflect on the chaos and destruction that we as a species have over the past few decades, kind of caused, and there's definitely some darker, lyrical concepts on this album. Now, with the darker sides of the album, you mentioned like the humor and everything like that. With the darker, what really kind of influenced you to cover those topics?
Well, it really over the course of a cycle of me writing a CD, recording it, press promotion for it, touring it, and then starting it all again. There's points when you just write down on either your iPhone notes or your pen paper. You write down ideas you might see on TV or something that's happening to you or a friend, or something you see on TV or whatever that might be kind of neat to write about when you eventually end up starting for a next one, if you're lucky. And I just had a notepad full of maybe 10 ideas, and one of them was, I guess it was just, I didn't really take it that seriously. It was kind of like a typical subject of, look what the human race is doing. It was more like what we're doing now, not so much about history. It's just the whole thing, what we've done with this, I sound cheesy here, but the gift that we're given, earth, environment, animals, each other, everything. And it was not so much it was just another subject to write on, okay? And I knew I could probably tap into something there. But when it came time to writing it, it was probably like the fourth song I wrote, and it was like, okay, what's another one on my list I could just think about? And again, it was another song, and then I got into it, and that's when I started really, really getting into it and realizing that, I wrote down, I think it was like the top 5 or 10 things that we need, or that are, I don't know, I'm trying to remember where I'm talking, but things we need to, live, and things on Earth that we are ruining that are not getting better. But mainly the top things, the air, the environment, each other, animals, just everything you can imagine, and what's the most important stuff there. And not one thing was getting better. It was just getting worse with time, whether it be a decade or 100 years or whatever it is. And you start getting into it and realizing, holy cow, this whole thing is going the wrong way. And I never thought about it that deeply before, even though I touched on some environmental kind of subjects before. I was always observing and writing it down, but there was no real, lightning bolt thing where you realize, holy cow, this is not good, And I'm not political, I'm not well educated, and I don't know how to fix a lot of these things, but somehow in 3 verses and a chorus and a little short bridge, I had to come up with what I thought were some things that we're doing wrong. And at least at the very end of the song, the last sentence or two, it's an extremely pessimistic song, but it's also reality. It's not glossing over anything. And there's great people in the world, and there's some good things being done, of course, and some things are getting better. But the big things are not getting better. It's just getting worse and worse, and it's not an age thing. It's just life right now. And at the end, I just sort of thought I would say, well, if we all come together, do something about this mess we've made, maybe there's a chance here on some of these things. So just to throw that into a song was kind of weird, because it wasn't so much poetry. Things rhymed in there, but you look at it back and you go, that's not exactly the most intelligent type of, it's not poetry. The music behind it is kind of strange, because it's got a drum groove we've never used before, and it's also kind of a cross between like a Immigrant Song meets an older grooving Megadeth meets Annihilator. So there's kind of like a new musical style in that one song only, met with and it's more of a happier sort of tap your foot thing, but it's really set to some lyrics that are pretty darn realistic but pessimistic. You know,
definitely raise some awareness on the whole thing, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what can be done about most of those things. That's such a big thing. But and again, I wrote it for myself. I wasn't trying to preach or anything, but just a sort of observation, and that's pretty well what most Annihilator songs are, observations.
Mm-hmm. So going over to the more instrumental side of it, with Suicide Society, you guys have come up with some of the most technically perfect, crisp, and crushingly taut riffs. Annihilator riffs are always like really memorable. But has it always been kind of your intention to write memorable riffs and focus less on the technical aspect of it, or just balance out both?
Not trying to. I mean, one thing I was always, as a kid and then as a teenager, I always noticed that someone like Glenn Tipton would kind of write his guitar, from Judas Priest obviously, he would write, almost a one-note or one-chord riff when Rob Halford was singing, so that the vocals stood out. And then when Rob was finished singing the word in the sentence, all of a sudden the guitar riff comes in, and then there you got the riff. So I kind of a little bit got influenced on that idea. And I was also, since I was brought up on hard rock, and like I'm 49 years old, so I technically was in the disco area when I was like 12, you know what I mean? And then into the hard rock and I can name a million groups, but the Journey, the stuff you see on hear on the radio when you're a young kid, right to Blondie, to Elton John, and then it became the Sabbath, the Scorpions. I'm trying to think of this stuff, but then the heavier music came in, and then the thrash metal. Mm-hmm. So what you get out of me is musically you're getting, and Van Halen and AC/DC and Kiss, and then into the Slayer, Venom, Exodus, Exciter, Razor, Anvil, Metallica, Megadeth. So I've got quite a spectrum there, and I did like Diamond, actually, as I knew him. Obviously Daryl from Pantera had we toured for like 2 or 3 months in Europe and way back in '91, and we sat around and actually talked about this. We were the same age, and they had, one of the discussions they had was kind of interesting because we were kids then, and it's weird when you look back after everything that's happened to everybody and the bands and the people and that, and you remember this conversation as crazy party-ish as it was. We were sitting in a somewhere in Spain in the daytime in a dressing room in a bull ring, and it was like ridiculous temperature, 100 and something, and we were just sitting there jamming guitar. We didn't. There was always this kind of weird thing where him and I never really clicked on that, because it wasn't a childish rivalry, but it was more like a sort of stay your distance. I think I really liked his playing, he really liked mine, and instead of both of us sort of jamming all the time and being buddies, we did the complete opposite. We just sort of walked by and said hi, and we jammed one time on that whole tour. I was more buddies with Phil because I guess it was less threatening. I don't know what it was. Remember, we were in our early 20s, right? Yep. But we were just talking, and one thing that stands out, and I don't even think I've ever said this before in my life because you kind of brought it up here in a way, is that they were kind of, he said they sort of planned and targeted, and you could see this with the business and with the musical direction and everything after Power Metal, and then with Cowboys from Hell they had a different thing going. And he said they kind of targeted this. They said they loved the Metallica drums and drum sound, they loved Black Sabbath, and he liked the Van Halen guitar solos. So if you looked at this and you went Sabbath, Van Halen, Metallica, and you listen to it, you go, holy cow, there's Lars's drum kit sound, there's the tuned downish kind of heavy Sabbathy guitar stuff, and there's that Randy Rhoads Van Halen guitar solo stuff. If you really listen to that, there's so much Van Halen in there, it's unbelievable, and Randy Rhoads, of course, and stuff. But he had the same influences roughly that I did, but what I did, and as I was talking about, is I didn't do that at all. I went the complete opposite, and I just invited everything in there, and if I felt like writing a ballad or a classical guitar piece to start our first album off, or a goofy song or a punk thrash kind of tune or a hard rock AC/DC style song, I just invited it in, and I didn't limit myself and said, I need to sort of focus on a sound and a style. I did the complete opposite. And ironically, well, not even ironically, if you look at how this whole music thing goes, is the people with the bigger commercial, I don't mean commercial, but, the bigger sales, the get bigger, most of them, not all, but most of them stick to something and target or stick with it, like AC/DC or Slayer. Whenever you buy those records, or Maiden even, when you buy those records, you know what that Slayer album's going to be like. It's just a matter of the quality level of the records or songs. Is it going to be a little better than the last one or not as good? Just with Annihilator, you get a more extreme version. You get like, what in the hell are these guys doing? And if you don't know the band, that's even more. So
it's a grab bag of styles.
Yeah, and what was actually worked pretty funny to even push it more extreme for us is I didn't focus in to try to keep the same lineup. I literally, when I was doing demos with the band, realized I couldn't get all the musicians together as a teenager, so I might as well learn how to play bass, write the lyrics. Maybe I'll sing on this demo. And the demo that got assigned I was singing on, or yelling or grunting or whatever it was. But so I kind of pushed it completely the opposite. And a band like us should not even be going, because our first 4 records had 4 different singers, and they were all 4 huge records outside of North America. So that hasn't been done either. So I set myself up. If I was lucky to continue making records back then and up to now, I set myself up for doing it all the wrong way. If you wanted to look at my odds of, quote, sales and success. And I think that is why we're still around and doing well in a lot of places, because it's the complete opposite of what you should be doing.
Yeah. That actually brings me to my next question, too. Throughout the years, you guys started out, in a different era than it is now, with all the illegal downloadings and streaming services and stuff like that. It's a lot harder to sell a record now than it was then. With all the decline in album sales and stuff like that, these days, obviously, a lot of bands are starting to get like second jobs via day jobs, all that stuff. Now, what about you guys over the period of time, in the last like that decade and a half? How have you guys managed to stay focused on music but still survive in your own personal lives as well?
Yeah, well, the first, remember I mentioned the first 4 records we did were pretty successful. Those were, the first 3 were with Roadrunner Records, and then we got dropped because we were literally told in '93 when the Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alanis Morissette, Smashing Pumpkins all came in.
We were told time in music history.
Oh yeah, well that was unfortunate for anything that was called heavy metal or thrash metal, and literally a memo went out to every record company, especially North America, saying anybody with metal in their bio, dump them, get rid of them, except if they're going to be like Pantera, Sepultura, Biohazard. That was kind of an unwritten memo that went out. And so that's exactly what happened to us. I got asked directly by the A&R guy that signed us, unless you're going to change your name and sound like these bands, we'll have to let you go. And I thought, okay, whoosh. So then I thought my career was pretty much done, because there didn't seem to be any venues or any agents or record companies that wanted to sign this stuff. There was only a very small amount of groups. I mean, even Priest and Iron Maiden were, Priest were playing my home city of Vancouver in the big arenas, and all of a sudden '93 hits, and when they finally rolled around with Ripper Owens, they were playing a club, so this ended up, and Maiden stayed away. So, Slayer was the only band, one of the only bands that just kept freaking hammering through North America. They were the ones to me that really got me through the metal shitty years, you know what I mean, for just forging on over here when they could have just went overseas. But anyway, basically the first 3 records, and then we were dropped. My manager at the time said, why don't you go where you wanted in Europe and Japan and license your records? And I'm like, what does that mean? And that was the beginning of me starting to learn about the business and manage myself. And since then, I would license my records, so the companies don't own it. They just have the right for a certain amount of years to make it and release it, and then it comes back to me in 5 or 7 years, and then I do another deal again. But to get to your question, is that the fourth record called King of the Kill was not even released in North America, but it was a massive album for us overseas, and that was the first time I was looking after myself, and I literally went from Sure, I was on tour buses for the first 3 albums and, quote, famous in a lot of places and playing big festivals and getting free guitar gear and stuff. But there was no real money other than my bills were paid while everybody else took my money, which was my fault. I didn't look after the business. Then in the King of the Kill record, all of a sudden I literally had 4 companies giving me a pile of money, and I was more than a quarter of a millionaire without even writing a note for that album. So I wisely, thanks to my father, bought a house and built a recording studio. And since then, that's how I was able to survive, because after that album I did, things slowly declined. And I had a 10-year semi-drought where we still released records and toured in Europe every year, but it just wasn't the same money. It was hard to keep members because of the money was less. And then in 2007, I came out with a record, and it all of a sudden, 10 years later, that from the drought of 97 to 2007, in that 10 years, thankfully I had the studio, and I was doing a lot of mixing and mastering and playing guitar solos in people's albums and producing stuff. And most of the stuff was European stuff that wasn't well known. But it made a living, and I wrote songs for other artists, Warner Chappell and Sony Publishing, TV little things here and there. So I kept very busy. I got to do it in music. And I literally just waited around to see if things would pick up. And 2007 it did. 2010 we did an album. It sold more. 2012 or 13 it sold way more. And now we're on track to probably double the last one before we've even released it. So that basically after the 2007 thing, now you're going over to Europe and you're playing a show for more than a few $1,000s. I mean, which you can't even get to Europe for a few $1,000s, right?
Oh yeah.
Then you're, if you take care of the business side and you do all these other things connected to your band, like endorsements and guitar clinics, and you do everything you can right and take care of all the business, you can make a living. So that was a hell of a long answer for a very short answer needed.
But you know what? That was an awesome answer, though. A lot of information there. So the next one.
I feel like I've bewildered or stunned you.
No, I'm actually I'm really digging these answers. I mean, there's just so much information in these answers. You're absolute joy to interview.
Thanks.
My next question, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, okay, brace ourselves here. What are the top 3 lessons that you've learned throughout your musical career that you would pass on to new musicians just starting out?
Number 1, stay away from booze and drugs. And if you can avoid cigarettes, go for it, because I fell into that trap. But the reason I sound like a grandpa or a dad with that one is simply because the metal and hard rock and whatever music business, as you said and everybody knows, has completely changed from back when it was a mega corporate, massive people running around with tons of money and fancy cars and money going everywhere. And now it's completely gone the opposite. It's almost underground in a lot of places. In order to survive doing this, I think, and this is part of the first answer, the booze drugs thing, is you have to do other things. You have to learn other instruments, learn stuff about how to make a demo, even if you're not good at it. Learn and read. Everything's on the internet now, so it's so much easier than when I was younger. You can find out how to do these engineering things and make the recordings. Even if you suck at it, it'll get you to the point where you don't have to rely on as many people, and you don't need as much money to do it. You don't wait for people. You have to learn about the business. You have to stay clean and sober in order to spend your time working every waking hour on this if you want it. If you don't really want it, go out and get loaded and go out to the clubs and go out and enjoy the rock star life if you're lucky enough to get thrown into a record deal. But, most people now are either doing it strictly for the love of it and not making a dime off it, and people are losing their relationships, their families, their jobs, their health, income, anything they own, their car. It's going down the shitter if you're just enjoying it too much and not taking care of the business side. So if you love music and you want a career in it, you've got to stay clean and sober, and you need to make that your number 1 priority, because it's not like the old days where these old guys like me and people older got so lucky and had a good A&R guy who saw this drunken partying band and said, hey, they got something. Let's give them a lot of coke and booze and pay for their bills and maybe get them a couple of cars. take all the money and promote them and make them famous, and then at the end of it, these guys have nothing left, and a lot of them have no health left. So if you want to be a musician and you want to make a career out of it, that's the important part. Is the second part. If you want the career out of it, you got to be clean and sober, and that's really the only advice, other than listen to lots of different styles and try not to sort of put yourself just into one or two bands. You know, like I want to be just like this band. You know, don't do it like that. Try to open your mind a bit. That's about it.
All right, perfect. So touring plans, anything finalized so far?
Well, as always, nothing in North America. There's always I host the jam on the 70,000 Tons of Metal, so at least I get to step foot in the United States briefly in Florida. But my own country, Canada, we've barely done any shows here since 1993, and in the States we haven't. Not for lack of want. It's just that we just cannot get agents or honest agents and labels to promote us. The thing that kind of sucks is a lot of the big bands, the top bands in the metal side of things have said to me over the years, come on down to the States and in Canada and tour with us and bring Annihilator as a support. And they will always say the same thing. But, of course, you have to have a record out and some promotion from the label, and we'll bring you. So I've had these amazing bands that as a kid I worshipped, or a teenager, saying, well, we'll take you on tour, but unless I put in my own money, you know, it's just not happening. And a lot of people say, why do you need all this money? Bands jump in vans. Well, I hire my guys, so I can't ask them to work for free.
Yep.
So there's expenses and all this shit. So basically, we're ready. And I've been talking to our label, UDR, about that, and they always, you know, just like a lot of the labels, oh, if you get an offer from a band, and then you tell the label how much you need to be able to pull this off, and they just go, oh, we can't spend more than $100. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we want to so bad, and I have a feeling the way that this is going is if I stay in the game and healthy enough, and we still keep busting our butt here, because of that bloody internet, we might just actually have a chance to come and do some tours in our home continent. That would be amazing.
That would be awesome. That would definitely be awesome. But, you know, as far as anything overseas, I know big part of our...
I hate to say it, but it's sounding like what it sounds like, but the usual. We're going to do our couple-month headline tour in Europe and South American thing coming up in the spring, and then I think I'm hosting the 70,000 Tons of Metal All-Star Jam again, and maybe even playing again on the boat. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we kind of usually do, which is lucky and awesome. But, you know, when things become too routine, you start taking them for granted, right?
Absolutely.
But, yeah, lots of good things there, and I hope the heck that the internet itself propels us into some offers to come down to the States.
That definitely would be awesome. We'd love to see you down here in the States, and I know a lot of our fans in India would like to see you over there as well. But you guys, you had just mentioned the 70K thing, and I know that recently this year on the 70K, you guys had a little bit of a reunion from one of your albums there with an old singer. Is there any? Do you guys think there's any possibility of doing more of that with him?
No, I think what happened was that's there's a singer on our second record called Never Neverland. His name was Coburn Farah he's in South Carolina, and I actually just talked to him this morning, text message. He just had a birthday last night, so I wish him happy birthday. But you know that it was sort of like our 25th anniversary of the album Never Neverland, and it's the biggest selling Annihilator record from 1990, and it did wonders for us. It was the best album I think I'll ever be able to write. It's one of those, you know, every band has that one or two that's like, okay, I'll never be able to beat that if I want to be honest. And, you know, I toyed with the idea, I wonder what the other guys are doing, but when I looked into it casually, I realized that a bunch of them could not physically even do it. So it became like, whoa, I wonder what Coburn's doing. So the singer I talked to and realized he probably could not do a tour or anything like that, and I didn't want that anyway. I would have considered doing some festivals or some shows with the original lineup. That would be awesome. But since that was not possible, I just invited him down to that cruise and said, you want to come up and sing a few songs? So that was how it worked, and it was amazing to see him and hear his voice, because I think one of the quite a few reasons why that album was our biggest and why artistically I think I'll never top that is part of it is because his voice doesn't sound like anyone. It's one of these rare guys where singers where, you know, regardless of whether it's operatic, talented, schooled or not, or whatever it is, it just stood out as being unique, and that's more important than any technical ability. And he just had something that made that one go, and it's always been my favorite one.
Inborn talent.
Yep.
So, okay, to close this thing out, I'd like to ask you to describe, and this is going to be fun, describe Annihilator's new album, Suicide Society, in just one sentence.
Oh, sentence. I thought you were going to say word. I even had the word for you. Okay. New album. A very large pot of metal stew.
Love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It's been an absolute honor.
Yeah, you do. Hey, you didn't give me much time to talk here, buddy. You were just talking the whole time. That's a joke, by the way.
I know. You know what? You were doing so well on your own. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were on like a total you were on a tear. You were on a roll. You know. You were killing it.